Hello, welcome to Impersonal Opinion, the podcast where we don't take our opinions personally. I'm Chandler Klebs, and I'm here with Jamie Soden and George Ortega. And right now, Jamie is looking for a comment that I recently left related to animal rights on YouTube. Because animal rights is sort of our topic today. Animal welfare. Cruelty to animals. Why people go vegetarian and vegan? Because this is very important. And um, Jamie can let me know whenever he's found that comment I left. But basically, I do think that this issue of how we treat other animals, all the non-human animals, the pigs, the cows, the chickens, the turkeys, the dogs, the cats, the whatever other animals there are, how we treat them reveals a lot about how we see them, and they are viewed, for many people, they're viewed as just something that we eat. They're viewed as just something that you can hurt. And I think this is, and here's the deal, it's not just harmful to these animals. The fact, yes, they experience terrible suffering their whole lives in these farms, and then they're killed without anesthetics and experience tons of pain. And this is awful, and that's enough reason for anyone to go vegan right there. But that's not the only reason. It's harmful to humans, because anybody who can look at this cow and say this cow exists only for my pleasure, this cow has no desires, no feelings that I should respect at all. Well, if they can do that with a cow, well, they can do that with another animal, including human animals. So I really am serious that this issue of animal welfare should be expanded as a massive issue that is not just about non-humans, but it's about human welfare as well. So yes, Jamie, have you found that comment I left? Because I forgot exactly what I said.
Yeah, hold on. I'm just scrolling through right now.
Yeah.
Um, but you said something along the lines of, you know, animal rights is an important issue, and you were saying to someone else it's not stupid, but then someone replied back to you saying going vegetarian is stupid or whatever. Can you please
Yeah. Yeah.
tell us what's going on?
Yeah, there was a weird guy who was saying that it's stupid because we need meat and we evolved to eat meat, and it was just really dumb. And so I quit. I think I quit commenting back to him after that, because and if you don't understand why I don't eat meat, then you won't understand why I'm against abortion, because the reasons are one and the same, that it's about not harming, it's about not killing, it's about not viewing another animal as a lesser being. And yeah, it's pretty important. In fact, I think in that comment I said it was even more important than the abortion issue, and I think I can clarify what I meant by that. Basically, let's just say that everybody stops having sex, and so there's no conception, therefore no abortion. Now that's a hypothetical example. I like that idea, but but let's just say that happened. Well, that still would not completely solve the problem of the animal welfare, because even once you end abortion, you still have to think, wait a minute, there's a great injustice being done to all these other animals on the planet. People are eating animal products which are not good for their health anyway. It's not good for the human's health, and
Yeah,
it's certainly
study
not.
about red meat a while back. I mean, people who eat red meat were 4 times more likely to get cancer. Is that right?
Yeah, I've read tons of stuff how vegetarians and vegans have less heart disease, less strokes, less cancer, less all these problems. And I think a lot of that has to do with how unsanitary the places are where the animals are raised and slaughtered and all this stuff. So it's unsanitary and full of disease germs that probably get into the human bodies when they eat the meat and other products,
Pathogens. Yeah.
and so it's not good. And so, I mean, yeah, so that's what convinced me that going vegan is the best thing for my health as well as the animals. And I know George is also vegan, so maybe George can tell us how that happened for him.
You're right,
Well,
Chandler.
yeah,
Uh,
no, it's basically the reasons of cruelty. I mean, um, I've understood. I mean, it doesn't make sense that animals wouldn't feel pain. I mean, anybody who has a dog or a cat, clearly understands that animals feel pain. And so, yeah, I've never understood humanity. I've never understood the world just being so callous, to these other animals, understanding. I mean, like, so obviously, I think much of the world is in denial. They basically, like, part of them believes, understands that animals feel pain, but I think they've been brainwashed by previous generations. I think like maybe 2, 3, 400 years ago, it might have been very difficult for people. For example, like you can't really get vitamin B12, I think, so easily, and calcium so easily from plant sources. So I think a few hundred years ago, it really was necessary for people to have protein from animal sources, for their health. So like I think we're still influenced from that. I think so like several past generations would tell people, no, you absolutely need meat and stuff. And so now the world has changed and we don't, but I think people are still stuck in this mindset of the past.
Yeah, people, they have a really hard time, breaking traditions that have been going on for hundreds or thousands of years. Um, and what's bizarre about it is that, like you said, it's not as necessary now as it might have been in the past. But what's interesting about it is that here's the problem I always had, because people talk about, well, for there are some humans who need to eat meat to survive, but here's the problem I always have with it, because what it comes down to is I realize, well, you know what? The survival of the humans are who, are eating some animal. I don't feel like that the humans have more of a right to life than those animals. And that's what's tricky about it, is that there's still a speciesism that goes on where people think about it, and I'm like, well, if there is, let's say that there's some Eskimo up in some northern region, and they are, let's say that they are trying to kill the polar bear to eat the polar bear, and the polar bear is trying to kill them to eat them. Whichever side wins, I know this sounds weird, guys, but it doesn't really matter to me, because both of them are animals trying to survive. They're doing the same thing. But ideally, I would like to find a way to even feed the polar bears a plant-based diet as well as the Eskimos. It's just hard in a cold region.
And the arguments for meat eating, like when people say, "Oh, you must eat meat to get your protein," right? That is just stupid because there are various vegetarian sources where you can get protein from, like bamboo. I did some research on that a while back. Mind you, you do have to boil it because it's got cyanide, I think. Um, and then you got like beans and nuts and things like that. They've got protein as well. And people seem to forget that the other primate, the gorilla, which is a herbivore, um, they seem to do just fine, eating plants, and they're incredibly strong. So I don't know where they get this idea from that we must eat meat to get protein. Yeah.
Yeah, and the elephants and the horses. The elephants just wander around Africa and they know what plants to eat, and they're like one of the strongest animals on the planet. And then horses don't eat meat. In fact, they're not even really capable of killing and eating animals the way. They just aren't built for that. But they eat grains and other stuff. I mean, so people who raise horses, they feed them plant-based diets, and these horses are so strong. So it's not about that you need to eat meat to be strong. We know that's false.
Yeah, and plus we have supplements. You can have like vitamins and proteins and whatever in shakes and pills and whatnot. So it's not like you can't supplement your diet. We have that ability now, don't we?
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yep. I think another reason why it's very important for us to especially with the livestock industry, to minimize that is they've done research, and between, depending on which study was made, between 20 and 50% of greenhouse gases has been attributed to the livestock industry. And so, like, all of a sudden it becomes an issue not just of morality and doing the right thing in our generation, but of like safeguarding future generations against, the devastating effects of climate change.
Yes. That's the thing about it, is that this is much bigger than most people will admit. And climate change is a big thing too, because, there's a lot of people who are being taught that climate change is just a lie invented by the scientists or something weird like that. I've seen some crazy stuff like that.
I've
Because,
seen someone on Twitter mention something about that. He said it's a propaganda by socialists, and I'm thinking, if you think it's propaganda, then you know he hasn't looked into it much, has he, George?
Well, again, yeah, there's like, I think, and like that kind of viewpoint has been like promoted by the oil industry and the coal industry. I mean, they routinely lie to people, and then people believe the lies and report them on news stories and all. So there's a whole industry that conspires to deceive people about climate change, and unfortunately, people believe what too much of what they read from these industries.
yeah, and it's not just that, but there's also like the whole religious thing too, like, oh well, God wouldn't let the planet be destroyed, sort of thing. And I saw a scene from what I think is a documentary called Jesus Camp or something about where they're promoting creationism and that global warming isn't real and all this weird stuff like that, and like, oh man, it's really just there's just a bunch of propaganda by the other side who has reasons to not acknowledge climate change is happening. And it is directly relevant. George, this is totally relevant to the whole vegan thing too, because it's about all life on the planet suffers from this. And of course, it's not that we're just harming these other animals, but that humans will be relatively safe. No, not really. We're going to be just as hurt by climate change as everyone else. And I am concerned about the melting of the Arctic regions, and our Antarctica and all that stuff.
Climate change is important, but animal rights is an important issue. You are right, Chandler, and I did try and help you out on that video, but it's just not sinking into this person. I mean, I do admit I have to, get myself on a vegetarian diet myself. When I get my own place, I will do that, because I'm just learning how to make vegetarian meals. But the thing is, some people grow up on meat, and it's hard to get them out of that lifestyle, because when
Yeah.
you're raised on meat, it becomes a sort of like an addiction, doesn't it, George? Yeah.
Yeah, I think you're right. They believe they need the meat. It's kind of like they don't understand that they can get the same nutrients from plant-based diets, or most of them. Yeah.
Yeah, and see what's interesting about it is that when I first went vegetarian, like before, first I just went vegetarian, where I stopped eating meat, and there wasn't really a big deal because I ate meat once in a while anyway, but it was never a big thing with me, so maybe that was why it was easier. Um, but for me, it was just simple. It's like, oh well, I'm not pro-life if I am paying people for the killing of these animals. So for me, it was about being pro-life, and not being a hypocrite. That was how it started out as. But then I started reading about, I read Magnus Vining's book, Why We Should Go Vegan, and I found out, oh, so that's what happens to these cows and the bulls and the baby chicks with,
Yeah.
oh man, when I found out how how the cows were raped and how the males for both the cattle and the chickens, which if they can't get milk or eggs from, they think, oh, the males are useless, let's kill them. And I'm like, this is sex selection abortion of non-humans. That's what it is to me. You know what I'm saying? It's
Yeah,
like,
but yeah, but it's worse because they're living and breathing and sentient, and they're being tortured a lot of the time. Because I can't go back to these videos. They're that disgusting, right? They actually
Yes.
butcher some of these animals in slaughterhouses, George. It's so awful.
No, I
Yeah.
know. And that's one thing about the internet. Before the internet, people weren't exposed to that. There'd be, it'd be very difficult to access that kind of information. But now, it's all over YouTube. So more and more people are waking up to this.
Yeah, I've seen videos on YouTube and I've also seen the movie Earthlings. And if you are at risk for a heart attack, don't watch that movie because it will probably kill you. It's so awful. But basically, that's what I realized is, wait a minute. Yes, because people argue about how sentient or conscious unborn human babies are, they are routinely killing baby bulls as well as male baby chicks all the time, and they are already born. They're already born. They are nobody except those crazy people questions how conscious they are. There's still these people like that commenter on YouTube who is saying that only humans are conscious, and I'm like, but you guys, like, we all know that's a lie. Anybody who looks at these animals know that they run away when they're scared. They feel pain and try to get away from it. They are just like us. And so that's why I said that the whole animal rights issue is even more important than the abortion issue, because this is happening to many more animals. The suffering that they're experiencing is probably greater than even what the unborn babies that are being aborted are
Yeah.
experiencing.
You are very consistent with your views, man. I've noticed that. I mean, you're against the death penalty. You're against, killing animals. You're against abortion. Um, and you don't like it when anyone suffers. So
Exactly. See, Jamie, what's happened is I started out as a Christian who was sort of pro-life, but then after I quit believing in God, I started thinking, wait a minute. This life, I mean, there's something about this life that's precious to me now, and I became more pro-life about human life already. But then I started thinking, wait a minute, the other animals are the same, so I need to be pro-life for all the animals. And so what happened is, as I lost certain traditions and stuff I grew up with, I started becoming more consistent, and I had to consider each issue: war, capital punishment, abortion, animal rights. I had to consider all the life and death issues, and I was trying to be consistent because I don't want to be a hypocrite. You know what I mean? I don't want to be saying one thing and saying, well, it's wrong to kill humans, but it's okay to kill baby chicks. I just can't do that. You know?
yeah, this person you was talking about animal rights issues with. I mean, he kept on making bad examples, like saying you can survive after shooting yourself in the foot, or what's it proven you can, live without arms when I lop yours off. That's me. I was like, okay, but what does that have to do with vegetarianism? I just said that, we can survive being vegetarians. Yeah, that's a fact. And
Yeah. And Jamie, this is why George doesn't read YouTube comments.
yeah,
Oh.
well, because George has to put up with idiocy.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. Also, like with these issues, abortion, climate change, even animal rights. What I've learned is like, we're doing something good by creating this podcast and putting the information out there, but unfortunately, the way the world is structured today, you have a very small percentage of the population who are, very rich and really, very indifferent to pretty much the whole spectrum of things that need to be done, on the behalf of morality, on behalf of humanity. And so, like, a lot of what we're doing is kind of like, yeah, it's good to put it out there, but it's not going to create much of an effect. So, like, basically, to a certain extent, even while, I'm grateful that people continue talking about these things, in my life, I'm kind of like shifting my focus from, spending a lot of time and not perhaps getting much, um, not much impact from, these causes to trying to find a way to like increase my personal happiness, trying to like get as happy as possible, because like the way I'm thinking is that like whether it's animal cruelty or sometimes abortion and rape and abuse and all, that people a lot of times do things that are really wrong because they're not very happy, and these are basically attempts by them to become happier. So like in my life, I'm trying to like find a way to like really bliss out, to really like find this a method to increase my personal happiness. And if that's then that's another way. That's kind of like a different avenue toward the same goal of helping people do the right thing. And if, to the extent we help people become much happier, then I think that they'll be much less likely to condone or engage in this kind of cruelty.
Yeah.
Yes. And you know what, George? I think you're absolutely right there. Because if people aren't happy, well, then because yeah, happiness is kind of what it's all about. Because if you are just miserable your whole life, then what's the point of life, sort of thing. And a lot of people, their argument for in favor of abortion, for example, is, well, that spares them the future suffering they'll have if they live their life on this world for a long time. And so, George, you're absolutely right. We have to focus on increasing happiness for people because that will help them behave more morally. Because happy people do less stupid things. I think they're happy doing whatever it is that is making them happy, and so they're not out there causing trouble.
Yeah, and like in my experience, I spent about 30 years or so trying to, like, for example, end global poverty. About 2 billion people on the planet just don't get enough to eat. And like we don't even care that much about them. It's not just the animals, the other, animals. But so like, after 30 years of kind of like, finally after 30 years realizing that my influence had very little effect on what happens, then I said to myself, well, if I start working on my happiness, fine, I'll either have influence or not, but I won't be wasting my time like I think I did, to a great extent with these causes, because like, to the extent that I become happier, that's a great thing. I mean, that's a great personal goal. So it's kind of like helping the world in a way that also absolutely, without fail, helps people, helps the person who's trying to become happier.
Yes, that's the thing, is that there still has to be a way, and that's something I've been trying to work on lately too, is realizing that, well, at some point there's got to be more to my life than just trying to fix all these problems, There's got to be a happiness that I can find apart from that. Um, and that's what I've been working on, because sometimes it's hard because, there's still that feeling where like I want to be aware of the suffering in case an opportunity does open up where I can do something about it, but at the same time not think about it so much that I just get depressed about how everyone is suffering and how evil people are. So
Yeah, because that's a problem. It's a problem for people. People read the news every day or watch TV programs with the news, and so much of it is depressing or makes people angry and all. And it's almost as if like the people who are in control of the media do that intentionally. It's almost as like, for example, like they may believe that to the extent people are less happy, people are going to buy products, the products of their sponsors, in order to become happier. So like I think there's an insidious part of this, the media that this basically, on the one hand, presents people with all these problems. On the other hand, works with the people who are in power to not allow people to influence these problems.
yeah, so that's the thing, and perhaps that would be a good topic for our next Impersonal Opinion podcast, is specifically what causes different people to find the most happiness in their lives and how they can go about discovering that. And obviously, George, you did a whole bunch of episodes of the Happiness Show, and I've listened to like the first 8 or so of them. But yeah, there's so much there, and I do think that as we increase happiness, then people's view of life will generally be more positive, and yeah, I think that'll be better. People will be happier, and if they're happier, they'll be nicer to people, which will make those people happier, and yeah, I think we can kind of we can cause a big change that way once people focus on happiness. And one of the problems, though, I think that happens is there's a lot of people who believe, well, happiness isn't something that you have in this life. It's something that happens after you die. And I'm like, oh, so you have to wait until you're dead to be happy? Well, if that's your philosophy, then why doesn't everyone kill themselves? That's the problem with it. That's not exactly the most pro-life thought, that we should all kill ourselves to go to heaven or whatever, like some people say.
Yeah, some of this animal rights stuff, right, with the meat eating and stuff, you want everyone to become vegetarian or stuff, right? But when you indict them with the thing that they're killing animals and stuff, you almost I know you don't mean it this way, Chandler, right? Because you don't mean to make them feel like bad people, right?
Yeah.
But you make it almost seem like they're murderers in a way.
Yeah, and the trick about it, Jamie, is yes, they're murderers, but it's not their fault. And that's why, our other podcast, Free Will, Science, and Religion, is so massively important. It's just because people understand that what they're doing is causing suffering, and it's wrong, but that's the way they were raised, and it's not their fault. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people will just go into denial, like George Ortega was saying. They try to absolve themselves from guilt, didn't they? Yeah.
Yeah, and they go about it all the wrong way because they try to blame other people to make it sound like, well, it's everybody else's fault. But those people don't have a free will either, and they
Mm.
were raised to be a certain way. They are working on bad information. And so it's interesting. And so it comes down to that there's no way to blame any of the humans around you for all the suffering. Nobody is fundamentally responsible, and that helps people become less defensive. And that's part of why I do believe that the free will topic is massively important. And once everybody gets that, then we will be able to focus so easily on the happiness and going vegan and what the value and meaning of life is, because I think a lot of the problem is that people still have this view that the purpose of life is to be in control of your life, which of course we're not. And I don't feel responsible for the fact that I was a meat eater at all, in my past, because I didn't know any better.
George, don't you believe that if people got that free will was an illusion, don't you think people would start going vegetarian more?
Well, yes, yes, because of this denial thing. In other words, like, I think one of the reasons people refuse to get educated about how horribly animals are abused is because, like, to the extent they did that, they would have to acknowledge that they and people that they know,
Hmm.
are actually doing this. So basically, like, and like, so if they didn't believe in free will, they'd fine. They'd understand that it was us, but they'd understand that it's not fundamentally our fault. So then they could look at the evidence and see what we're doing without feeling guilty about it, and then without having to unconsciously resort to denial in order to avoid the pain of that guilt. So absolutely, this free will belief just like is so profoundly important to overcoming so much that we as humans do wrong on the planet, that we just deny it. We don't look at the evidence because it implicates us.
Yeah.
What people don't realize is that they're already trying to excuse their actions as it is. That's why they're denying the fact that um, meat eating is contributing to these animals being tortured in slaughterhouses and all that stuff.
Yeah, and they won't need to go into denial once they understand that they're not really to blame, and we're not accusing them, and we're not trying to punish them. We're just trying to show them what's wrong about that and give them information which will help them change. So yeah, and let's see, we've been going for about 30 minutes. So do you suppose we should end this one then?
Sounds great.
All right. Well, you've been listening to Impersonal Opinion, the podcast where we don't take our opinions personally. And this has been Chandler Klebs, George Ortega, and Jamie Soden, and it's been a great talk about animal rights, climate change, and all sorts of happiness and all that. So, bye-bye for now.